Sean joins us this morning on the Harbor One hotline, and he is working while the Bruins are golfing. Sean, good morning.
Well, that was a reminder of depression right there, because usually you read catches, wishes, Boston's hockey team, great success in the postseason. So that line has gone away. Yeah, I thought we'd be chatting on these Wednesdays for a little bit longer than this, but what can you do? We're all still in recovery mode, and it's still hard.
Where do you rank this when it comes to collapses in sports?
Well, I don't think, excuse me, it was, in and of itself a huge collapse, because I think if you watch the games, you saw, first of all, Florida's pretty good. I remember we were having conversations before the playoffs. Well, who would the Bruins rather play? What do you think would be the best matchup? Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Florida. And we talked about, Florida's talent and their success last year and some of the reasons why they didn't have as much success this season. But they're really good, and all the things that they did to beat the Bruins in that series, they did last night. If you watch the Toronto game, I mean, they were hard on the forecheck. They won most of the puck battles, and they're just a athletic, fast, gritty, tough, well-coached team. So, we all watch the games. I think if you watch the games, you didn't come away saying, wow, how did they lose to that team? I mean, that team's pretty good. Now, that having been said, the Bruins didn't do so many of the things that they did in the regular season to set the record with 65 wins. They didn't get the big saves. They couldn't get the puck out of their own net. They couldn't protect leads in the third period. They didn't coach as well as they did in the regular season. So, I wouldn't describe it as a collapse, but, I think it's a big surprise given they were 43 points ahead of Florida. But, I don't think it was a collapse. But they, to me, a collapse means you choked. I don't think they choked. I just think, some of the things that they didn't do well in the series were a byproduct of some of the things that Florida does really well. I remember before the playoffs started, Dan Shaughnessy had an article with the great Harry Senden. And Harry talked about, one of maybe the most important thing in the playoffs is puck possession. And, we saw that. That's what Florida did so well.
You brought up coaching. Do you think Jim Montgomery got out-coached?
Yes, I do. And it's hard to say that because, we've talked a lot in these segments about, the biggest reasons why the Bruins had this record-setting season. I think Jim Montgomery was at the top of the list. Remember, I said that when we talked about it not too long ago. The system that he brought, the attitude that he brought, he deserved a tremendous amount of success and still deserves it for the success they had in the regular season. But, I think the fiddling with the lineup, I think, Trent Frederick coming out, I don't know what I know. Lauko is an energetic fourth line guy, but to me, Trent Frederick should have been in the lineup for every game. Matt Grzelcyk should have been in the lineup for every game. And we talked a lot, Wiggy, about do you lean on the one goalie in the playoffs, or do And I said, yeah, I understand. That Ullmark should be the front guy, but I wouldn't go away from the formula that works. And we saw the reason why. You ran the other guy, Ullmark, into the ground, and it came out after the fact, but I think there was some suspicion before it came out the other day that he was not physically 100%. So to keep running him out there, every day doesn't make any sense. So, but I also think the players need to absorb a lot of their, blame because ultimately it's almost always mostly the players when it goes like this. The Bruins treated the puck like a hand grenade in those two home losses. Game 2, they basically handed Florida the game with all the horrible giveaways. And then obviously they had the catastrophic, Ullmark out of the net giveaway in Game 5 that lost that game. But for all that having been said, to have a lead in the third period in Game 6 when you can win the series, to have a lead with a minute to go in Game 7 when you can win the series, for all those things we just said, they were still that close to advancing. So, which I think makes it even that much harder to deal with.
Yeah, Sean, help me out with how you don't see this as a collapse or a choke when you're up 3-1 in the series. And just to say that you had a goal lead with a minute left to go in the game in Game 7 and you lose the series. Listen, I love you, bro, but I'm trying to figure out how this is not a major choke.
I mean, a choke means the pressure got to them. So when they had the lead with a minute to go, they couldn't get the puck out of their own zone because of the pressure. The pressure that Florida put on them. I just hate to use that word. I would think that you would too, having played. You know what I mean? It's a hard word. Now, is it one of the worst, hardest to process losses in Boston sports history? Sure, if we put it up against the regular season that they had, but you also had a regular season where everything came together. We talked a lot about, were they really better than those Montreal Canadian teams in some of the records that they broke? No. So I don't know. I think choke's a really hard word. I hate to use it in the context of blaming players because, I think where they had a really big problem, and maybe the pressure got to them, was handling the puck in their own end. To me, that was a huge part of the whole series, all the turnovers. But as I said, part of that has to be that the Florida Panthers, you watched last night, Tkachuk for Hagee. Sam Bennett, is a playoff-style player. Tkachuk is the best player in the series on either team.
Yeah.
That having been said, they had a lot of guys who didn't play as well as they had. What happened to Hampus Lindholm? I asked Montgomery that before one of the games we did in this series. For a lot of the year, you could have made the argument he was their best player, certainly their best defenseman. He was bad for the last month or two. Charlie McAvoy, when you're looking at people to point to about get the puck out of your own end, whether it's passing it out or skating it out, he was, to me, the biggest offender in terms of the heinous giveaways that led to great opportunities for Florida. But I just hate to use that word, Wiggy. Maybe it's true. Maybe it is the pressure got to him. I think it's a huge disappointment, but I just don't like to use that word.
Sean, when you hear some of these guys now talk about injuries that they were dealing with in this series, do you put any of the blame on that, or do you think that these are excuses of convenience now that they're out?
Well, I think if the goalie's hurt, that's the one that bothers me. There was reason to believe he got hurt at the very end of the regular season. If that's the case, even more reason why Swayman should have played more. You had the great opportunity in Game 5 to play him. You're up 3-1, and they didn't. So, yeah, if he was hurt, that's a plausible explanation for why he didn't perform anywhere near the way he did. But that goes hand in hand with they didn't play the same way in front of them the way they did. One of the reasons they were a great third-period team is they went into lockdown mode in the third period and protected the goal, and the other team, they continued to attack the offense, then the other teams didn't get chances. Obviously, that didn't happen in this series. They were under siege and on their heels for a lot of those late-game situations, Game 6, Game 7, and earlier in the series. So, and the reality, Courtney, as you know, is everybody's hurt in the playoffs. We did the Eastern Conference Final, the Stanley Cup Final last year, and Tampa Bay lost in the final. And the next day, they had a list of about 10 guys who were playing with broken bones, needed shoulder surgery, knee surgery, and they were out there playing in the playoffs. So I don't think that's an excuse, and it certainly shouldn't be for a team that bragged about their depth. I mean, look at the forwards we have sitting out. Look at the defense. We don't even have enough defensive spots to play Connor Clifton or Matt Grzelcyk. Only one of them can play. So if you're talking about your depth and what an advantage it is, then when you get into, if guys are hurt, play the guys who aren't as hurt.
Where are you on Patrice Bergeron returning?
Well, I think he had a great year. I mean, can he still be an effective player? Again, number 2 in the league in face-offs, in the top, whatever he was, 25, maybe even better than that in plus minus. We're all talking about what a big loss it was when he couldn't play in some of those games at the end of the year. So, if he's that big a factor, why wouldn't you want him to come back and play? So to me, it's not a matter, well, he's lost something, he shouldn't play. He's still a very good player. So the question just becomes, does he want to continue to play?
Well, Wiggy said yesterday he's an underachiever here.
Who, Bergeron?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we saw the video, right, that circulated at the beginning of the playoffs where he could barely skate when he was out there on the ice practicing by himself, skating by himself. And, it was pretty widely known he had a back problem, which he acknowledged after the series ended. So, I think, to me, he gets a pass if he wasn't as good in the playoff series. 37-year-old guy out there playing with a herniated disc, and maybe that'll be the reason that he doesn't come back. He just doesn't physically want to do it anymore, think that he can't. But, from an effectiveness standpoint, I still think he was one of their best and most important players all year. So, and he came back, as we all know, at a very team-friendly contract, which makes it easier. If you come back for another $2.5 million a year, absolutely bring him back. So I hope he continues. I remember I did the game. I watched the game last year, Game 7. I wish I did the Game 7 when they played Carolina. And actually, I did do the Game 7. What am I saying? Last year against Carolina. And, I remember watching him stay on the ice and hug all his teammates. And, all the speculation last year at this time was that he wasn't going to come back. And then most of the reason that he came back was supposedly because Bruce Cassidy didn't come back. So, he went through this last year, decided to come back. I would say at the very least there's a chance once he gets a little further away from the disappointment of this and processes it.
Sean, you talked about your conversations with Monty pregame. I'm curious as to how you saw his evolution throughout the series. It appeared to me that the comments after Game 7 about goalie Bob and the reaction in Game 5 seemed to be out of character for him, sort of losing his cool a bit. Yeah.
As I said, I don't think he had a great series, really, by almost any standard. And those comments disappointed me. I know goalie Bob has a lot to do with the day-to-day operation of the goaltending, and has for quite a while. But at the end of the day, you're the head coach. You decide who plays at every position. And to sort of, that to me reeked of don't blame me. Goalie Bob said this should be the guy, so that's the guy. If I was the head coach, I'd say, Ullmark wasn't very good in Game 6. He wasn't as good as he was in the regular season in most of the earlier games before Game 6. We're in uncharted territory here with him playing all these games in quick succession. The other guy, if he was worse, Swayman, he was fractionally worse. It wasn't like a lot of teams in the NHL who there's a huge goalie drop-off if you go to the second guy and you hope you don't have to play him. The Bruins had the ultimate luxury, which they didn't really use. And I felt bad for Swayman getting thrown in there. I think it really threw the team on their heels at the beginning of Game 7 when he gave up one that went right through him. I think everybody there kind of, oh, geez, and then, to his credit, he was fine. He was okay after that. But, I don't think, and I didn't like Montgomery talking about, the players aren't doing what they did. They're not executing. They're not whatever. You're the head coach. You got a lot of the credit. Lion's share of the credit for all of that success in the regular season. Own some of the blame. Step up and take it. He was not at his best.
Sean, Ullmark said yesterday they want to run it back. Can they run it back with this same team and expect a different result?
Well, Bergeron and Krejci, I'll give Krejci credit. We talked about, was he really hurt or was it a healthy scratch situation? They just didn't want to say that he wasn't hurt because they were scratching him. I thought he was really slow. And yet, he goes out and has a goal and 2 assists in the game that they had to have and ultimately didn't have. So, I don't know if you bring him back. And I also think as we evaluate the season, they kind of caught lightning in a bottle, right? When you look at the 65 wins, they had one of those years in sports where everything comes together. The Red Sox have had a few of those in recent years where they had surprising success kind of out of nowhere, and then they revert back to something else. So, I think there's going to be some reversion to the mean for the Bruins anyway. I think we saw they're not this dominant juggernaut. They weren't in the playoffs that they were in the regular season. So, I don't think to say, bring everybody back and we'll go threaten the league wins record again. Now, do I think they'd be a really good team? Yeah, I do, with mostly the same cast at least. But, they've got some tough decisions to make. Obviously all those guys they got at the trade deadline are going to need contracts, and there's other situations contractually they have to deal with too.
All right, Sean, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
I'm heartbroken we won't be able to chat. And
I
never
know.
mind, just the fan part of it, but
Well,
they're killing my May. I thought I was going to have all these home games. Going into the TD Garden and calling a bunch of Bruins games, which was a dream of mine since I was 8 years old. So I share in the pain, and obviously, for ESPN, losing the Bruins early, losing the New York Rangers, losing Colorado. The ratings way up. The ratings were up 22% in the first round over last year, from what I was told. So there was great momentum there. We'll see if that is sustained, but. Really enjoyed this every Wednesday. I wish you well and keep up the great work.
all right, we'll see you around, I'm sure, at the old ballpark.
I hope so.
Maybe at the old ballpark, maybe in the
Yeah, I'm
Seaport.
sure.
Oh yeah, Sean. By the way, a little birdie told me that you might be neighbors with Greg. Do you ever look out your window and see Greg in the hot tub at Echelon? Because that would be a very creepy sight.
We have not moved into his neighborhood yet, but
All right.
if I do, I will look away quickly.
Yeah, please.
Enjoy the view.
I have goggles for you.
I sometimes see Sean dining out and about, maybe over at Davio's
Oh,
or
okay.
such. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Spent a lot of time over there at Davio's, and we'll continue to do that and the other fine establishments of the Seaport. We're looking forward to getting in there and looking forward to seeing Greg around, as I always do when I run into any of you wonderful people.
All right. Somebody's moving on up.
Yep.
All right, Sean, we'll talk to you soon, bud. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right, there he is, the great Sean McDonough.